The absence of rats lingered with me as we moved forward, not as fear exactly, but as a kind of quiet instruction, the sort one learns to heed after surviving long enough to recognize patterns that announce themselves only once. We went on anyway. The passages narrowed as we descended, their stonework older and less deliberate than the temple above, carved first for water rather than people, and only later repurposed for whatever the city no longer wished to consider. Moisture clung to every surface, and the air pressed in on us, thick and unmoving, carrying the layered scent of waste, rot, and something else that resisted easy naming. Water ran in shallow channels along the sides of the tunnel, steady and patient, neither rushing nor stagnant, and the sound of it followed us the way a thought does when it refuses to be dismissed. Each step echoed longer than it should have, rebounding off unseen corners and returning to us altered, as if the stone itself were listening. I slowed our pace without stopping us entirely, letting distance stretch between footsteps so sound had time to settle before the next one disturbed it again. The fighter adjusted easily, matching my rhythm without comment, while the cleric's breath grew more measured, quieter, as though he were attempting to make himself smaller in a space that had no interest in accommodating him. The mage trailed a hand along the wall as we moved, fingers brushing over stone that had been worn smooth not by time, but by contact, and I noticed the way his expression shifted, curiosity giving way to something more restrained. He had seen enough altered places to recognize when function had replaced intent. The ranger took the rear, his attention fixed not ahead of us, but behind, listening for changes that had not yet occurred. That, more than anything else, told me we were no longer alone. We came to a wider junction where several tunnels met, their mouths dark and indistinct, each promising a continuation of the same. Here, the signs of use were no longer subtle. Scuff marks marred the stone where heavy loads had been dragged repeatedly along the same routes, and iron rings had been set into the walls at regular intervals, worn smooth from ropes that had been tied and untied too many times to count. Someone had planned this. The channels widened here as well, carrying more water, and the sound of it grew louder, filling the space with a constant low murmur that made individual noises harder to isolate. It was clever in its way, using the city's own waste to mask what happened beneath it. I crouched near one of the rings and ran my fingers along the stone beneath it, feeling the grooves carved by friction and repetition, and I did not need to imagine what had caused them. The marks spoke plainly enough on their own. We moved on. The farther we descended, the more the air changed, growing warmer now instead of cooler, heavy with breath and proximity, and beneath the smell of sewage there was another layer, faint but unmistakable, the smell of unwashed bodies kept too long in too little space. It clung to the back of the throat and lingered there, refusing to be swallowed or ignored. The cleric noticed it too. He did not speak, but his hand tightened around the symbol at his neck, not in prayer exactly, but in something closer to resolve, and I wondered briefly whether the god he served was accustomed to being brought into places like this, or whether faith, like cities, learned to look away when it became inconvenient. Voices reached us then, distant and indistinct, not raised in alarm but lowered in routine, overlapping and unhurried. They carried poorly through the stone, stripped of words and intention until all that remained was the sound of people who believed themselves unobserved. That was dangerous. People who believe they are unobserved grow careless, and carelessness creates opportunities, but it also creates unpredictability, and I have learned to distrust anything that relies too heavily on chance. I raised a hand again, and we stopped. In the silence that followed, the water continued its work, and somewhere ahead metal scraped softly against stone, followed by the dull thud of something set down, without care. A laugh drifted back to us then, brief and unconsidered, the sound of someone at ease in a place where ease should not have existed. The fighter's jaw tightened, though he did not move. The ranger shifted his stance, adjusting weight and balance with the unconscious precision of someone who expected to need it soon. I felt the familiar narrowing then, the sense that choices were beginning to arrange themselves into fewer and fewer viable paths, and I knew that whatever lay ahead would not allow us the luxury of further observation for long. This was no longer merely a hidden operation beneath a city that preferred ignorance. This was a system, and systems, once entered, do not allow one to pass through unchanged. I took a slow breath, tasting the air one last time as it was, before it became something else entirely, and then I moved forward, keeping to the shadows where the stone dipped and folded, where light struggled to reach and sound lost its certainty. Above us, Highport continued its quiet routines. Below us, the work went on, and somewhere between those two truths, we were about to be noticed.